There's a certain kind of moment that's hard to explain to anyone else. You're in a conversation, you're saying something that matters to you, you're choosing your words carefully, trying to make sure it comes out the way you mean it. And then the other person responds. But it's slightly off. Not completely wrong, just not quite right. They nod, they reply, maybe they even agree, but something in you recognizes that they didn't really get it, not the full thing, not the part you were actually trying to express. And for a second, you consider explaining it again. But instead, you just let it go. Not because it didn't matter, but because something in you has learned that trying again won't change much. From the outside, moments like that don't look like anything. A normal conversation, a normal response. But internally, something quiet happens. You pull back a little. You simplify what you say next. Or you stop saying it altogether. And over time, that becomes a pattern. Most people don't notice this kind of experience, and when they do, they tend to misunderstand it. They might assume you're closed off, or distant, or hard to read. Sometimes they think you're not expressive enough, that you don't communicate clearly, that you keep things to yourself for no real reason. But that's not usually what's happening. It's not that you don't want to be understood. It's that something in your experience has made you careful about expecting it. People who feel like they've never really been understood are often described in simple ways, but there's more going on here than people realize. What looks like quietness or distance is often something deeper. From a psychological perspective, communication isn't just about exchanging words. It's about alignment. It's about whether what you mean internally is actually received in the way you intended. And that doesn't always happen evenly for everyone. Some people are naturally more attuned to nuance. They think in layers, they feel things with a level of detail that doesn't always translate easily into simple language. Their thoughts aren't linear, their emotions aren't always easy to summarize. So when they try to express something, what comes out is often only a small part of what they actually mean. And when that happens repeatedly, something begins to shift. There's research in cognitive and emotional processing that shows how repeated misalignment in communication can affect how a person chooses to express themselves. Not in a dramatic way, just gradually. The brain starts to notice the pattern. It recognizes that the effort it takes to fully explain something isn't always matched by the level of understanding it receives in return. So it adapts. It shortens things, simplifies them. Or sometimes it decides it's not worth explaining at all. Not out of frustration, just efficiency. And over time, that can create a sense that being fully understood isn't something to expect. It becomes something that feels rare rather than normal. But this pattern isn't just about how your mind works, it's also shaped by where you learn to communicate in the first place. If you grew up in an environment where your thoughts weren't always fully heard, where your emotions were minimized, overlooked, or misinterpreted, your brain learns something important very early on. It learns that expression doesn't always lead to understanding. So instead of pushing harder, it becomes more selective, more internal. You might start to process things on your own rather than trying to explain them. You might learn how to translate your thoughts into something simpler just to be understood, even if it doesn't fully represent what you mean. Or you might stop sharing certain parts of yourself altogether. Not because you don't want connection, but because your system has learned how often that connection doesn't quite land. And once that becomes familiar, it doesn't just stay in the past. It follows you into new interactions. So even when you're around people who might understand you, there can still be a subtle hesitation. A pause before you say something real. A quiet question in the back of your mind about whether it will actually be received the way you intend. It's not loud. It's just there. And that's where this experience can become complicated. Because from the outside, it can look like you're holding back. But internally, it's often just a kind of filtering. You're choosing what feels worth explaining. You're deciding how much of something to share based on how likely it is to be understood. And that can create distance. Not because you want it, but because it happens gradually. There's also something else that tends to develop alongside this. When you've spent a lot of time not feeling fully understood, you often become very good at understanding others. You learn how to listen closely, how to read between the lines, how to pick up on what someone means even if they don't say it perfectly. Because you know what it feels like when that doesn't happen. And that creates a kind of imbalance. You understand people in ways that feel natural to you. But you don't always experience that same level of understanding coming back. Not because people don't care, but because not everyone processes things at the same depth. And that difference can feel isolating, even in normal interactions. It's important to say this clearly. There's nothing inherently better about needing deeper understanding, and there's nothing lacking about communicating more simply or directly. People are wired differently in how they think, feel, and express. Some people communicate in clear, straightforward ways. Others experience things in layers that take more time to unfold. Neither is more valid. They're just different. But when your mind operates in those deeper layers, it can make connection feel more specific, more dependent on alignment, and less frequent. There's also a quiet paradox in this. The same depth that makes you feel misunderstood can also be the reason you experience connection so strongly when it does happen. Because when someone does understand you, when they really get what you're trying to say without you having to simplify it, it feels different. Not dramatic, just clear, like something finally matches. And that's not something you forget easily. But because it's rare, it can also shape your expectations. You might stop looking for that kind of connection in most places. You might assume it won't happen often. And in some ways, that protects you from disappointment. But it can also make you more closed than you realize. Not intentionally, just quietly. And that doesn't mean something is wrong. It means your system adapted to a pattern it recognized early on. It learned how to protect your energy, how to reduce effort where it didn't feel effective, how to create stability in its own way. And that has value. It means you can think deeply without needing constant validation. It means you can process things internally with clarity. It means you don't rely entirely on others to make sense of your experience. But it also means there may be parts of you that still expect not to be fully understood, even when the possibility is there. And that's something worth noticing. Not to change it, just to see it. Because when you understand why you've learned to hold certain things back, it becomes easier to relate to yourself differently. You stop seeing your silence as distance. You start recognizing it as discernment. You stop assuming that being misunderstood means you're hard to understand. You start seeing that sometimes it's just a matter of alignment. And that shifts something. Because it reminds you that your way of thinking and feeling isn't the problem. It just operates on a level that isn't always immediately visible. And that doesn't make it less valid. It just makes it more specific. So if this feels familiar, it's not because there's something missing in you. It's because there's something particular about how you experience the world and how you try to share that experience with others. And once you start to see that clearly, there are other patterns connected to it that begin to stand out. They're subtle, but they follow the same quiet logic. And if you keep paying attention to them, they tend to make more sense over time.